Hello everyone, how are you doing today? My name is Michaela Valletta, also known as The Body Scientist, and I'm live on my IG page, so those of you who already follow me know who I am, but for those of you who don't, I am a strength and conditioning specialist with a background in exercise and sports science, nutrition science, strength and conditioning, and I am currently working on a Master of Science in Medical Cannabis Science and Therapeutics. And I've committed my life to studying all the ways to take our body to its highest level. Hey girl. Yeah, I haven't been on live for a while. I've just been busy in hustle mode. Haven't felt like being in front of the camera, but there's so many things that's been on my mind, so many things I've been wanting to talk about. Two things mainly, and I'm going to discuss both of them in this video. Two topics that are kind of unrelated. So, for those of you who follow my work, you know I'm always talking about food quality, right? So I'm not the kind of nutritionist or so-called dietitian who's talking about counting calories and, eating this low-fat this and all this processed stuff. I talk a lot about food quality and getting your food from, local farmers. Sustainable agriculture is super important, right? And so when it comes to cannabis, this live will be saved and reposted onto my YouTube page. So when it comes to cannabis, it's interesting because, of course, I've been learning more about the medicinal properties over the past few years, and that's especially been accelerated over the past year. However, I kept hearing, we see it's being legalized all over the U.S., and many countries around the world are also legalizing it for so-called recreational or adult use and medicinal use, right? Which to me, the two kind of can cross paths because I always used it for stress reduction, calming my nerves, dealing with trauma, okay? But when I kept hearing, of course, a lot of the dispensaries, they're adding these crazy taxes. And like I'm currently in Chicago, that's where I live, but I'm from New York, so I go back and forth. But like Chicago, I remember a few years ago going to a dispensary here, and the prices were just crazy, and I couldn't see the flower, because I remember going to a dispensary in the West Coast and being able to see the flower. And I feel like maybe I was able to smell it, but maybe that was just in my mind. But I at least remember seeing it. And so the fact that you couldn't see anything and it was super expensive, I'm like, who would buy anything from a dispensary? And I just kept getting it from my weed man, right? And then I also use tinctures and topicals, but that is made by a good friend of mine who, makes it, grows it without a lot of chemicals. Because he started making me aware years ago that a lot of people who grow cannabis, they use a lot of really toxic chemicals on it. And that's why also I don't vape. He told me years ago, I was never interested in vaping. I was more of a roll of flower and a tobacco leaf kind of person. But I had an apartment 6 years ago where it was a no smoking building, and my landlord kept saying something. So I used the vape to try to, because I'm like, I don't want to go outside every time. And my friend told me, no, they put a lot of really bad chemicals in that. And that's what made me stop using that. Like, no, I just So now fast forward, okay, I'm looking at these dispensaries, and there's dispensaries in New Jersey and New York or whatever. And people are like, why would somebody buy legal weed? Because it's so expensive. And there's been all these articles talking about how the illegal market, the illicit cannabis market, has been outselling or making more money or even damaging the legal market, right? And so, of course, like most people, I'm just like, of course, because who wants to spend all that money in a dispensary? Even though if you are, there's levels to it. Because if somebody's using cannabis medicinally, sometimes they have specific needs. And just getting it from the weed man is not going to be good enough. They might need access to specific strains. I know back in the day, like at least in New York, most of the time, and not just New York, because I always, my whole adult life been traveling a lot around the country, and it was kind of like whatever weed the weed man had is the weed that she smoked. Like there were some weed men that had various strains, like the dude that I get my stuff that I was getting it from in Chicago, Mexican dude, he had, like every day he got like 8 new strains, right? But most weed people, it was just like whatever they had, that's what it was. But and some people will say, oh, I don't like smoking because it makes me tired, it makes me paranoid. It's like, there are different strains with different properties that have different effects on you. There's sleepy weed that makes you want to pass the fuck out. And there is weed that will, you're up in your cerebral, like you want to write a book right now, you'll be super focused on it, the semester, the semester that I smoked the most weed in college, I was on the dean's list. I was also an athlete. I was a track athlete. All the athletes I knew smoked. But I was a science major, and I was on the dean's list when I smoked the most. Okay, so I was super focused. I'd be focused on what the instructor was saying when nobody else was. Sour diesel. I just got sour diesel just now from the dispensary. I just came back. I should have had it so I could have showed you. I just got sour diesel and another strain called pomelo diesel. So the thing is that like when people, because now it's like I don't just want any strains. First of all, like I'm not really a big fan of indicas. I mean, there's a debate about that scientifically. People who are really into the plant science will say that the way that the general public categorizes indica and sativa is incorrect. Like people usually would say indica makes you sleepy. That's the couch lock, in the couch. But if you want to be awake and, cerebral and focused, then you want a sativa. That's generally how it's characterized. But people who are really into the science of it say that's not really true. And it gets more complex than that. But to me, I find that when I'm getting something from a dispensary or I'm getting something from the weed dude, I'm going to say, when I say sativas, it's the shit that I want, the shit that keeps me up. And when I smoke indicas, it makes me pass the fuck out, okay? And I really am not a fan of indicas, but like last night I was up and I'm on the phone, I need to go to sleep, and I had this indica that I really don't smoke, and I say, you know what, let me just smoke this shit so I can make that. I was fucking falling asleep on the phone after I smoked that. Now, I do not want to do that in the daytime, okay? There's nothing worse than feeling tired as shit when you have stuff to do. So with that being said, that gives, the dispensary the fact that, there are different strains and you have that access, that's good, right? So anyhow, I just kind of, when I was hearing that like the illicit market was outperforming the legal market, like most people, I'm like, of course, because who's spending all that money at the dispensary? Can I speak on edibles versus smoking? Yes, I can. I will get back to that. Hopefully I don't forget. If I start to forget, let me know. But I'm just going to finish this point and I'll get into that. So what I started to learn, okay, and you can go on YouTube and you'll find several videos, okay, where there are these cartels, okay, and okay, this in combination with the fentanyl issue, all right, the fentanyl issue, we've all been hearing about people ODing from fentanyl, okay, we've all been hearing that, and I think a lot of people think, I mean, I kind of thought this, but I think a lot of people think that these people who are ODing on fentanyl are trying to take fentanyl. Like they're purposely going out and taking fentanyl and ODing. That's not what's happening. These people who are dying of fentanyl poisoning, they are thinking that they're taking heroin, cocaine, or some type of pills, okay? Percocets, or it's probably an ecstasy. I don't even hear people talk about ecstasy anymore, but I'm sure they put it in that because ecstasy pills been laced with stuff. But all of those, right? So none of these people are intentionally trying to take fentanyl, okay? But all these drugs are being laced with fentanyl. And, a lot of celebrities have died from fentanyl. Prince died because his pill was laced with fentanyl. And so to think Prince, Tom Petty, DMX, Michael K. Williams, that dude from, I think, Shock G, and I think Gangsta Boo, they also think that, right? So even when you have, I mean, to me, for someone like Prince, I'm like, how did Prince think he was taking a Percocet and it was laced with fentanyl? Because to me, if you're getting it from the doctor, you're getting it from the pharmacy, that shouldn't happen. So he must have been getting it illegally, which would then imply to me that you had an addiction or something. And opioids are super addictive, okay? Which is one of the reasons why me getting into cannabis medicine was perfect, because I don't take medication. I don't take antibiotics, okay? I don't care what reason a doctor, whoever's trying to, I do not take it. I do probiotics. I do very potent antimicrobial herbs. I do not take headache medicine. I don't take Advil. I was addicted to Advil in the 7th grade, and I learned then for my headaches, and I learned then about the rebound effect. And ever since then, I got really into researching, like, why do I have headaches, and just learning. And then my path of learning about the body just continued. But ever since the 7th grade, I've never popped a Tylenol or Advil or something for a headache. Now I'll use some CBD oil, and I'll also analyze and think, like, because when I get headaches, either I'm super sleep deprived, I am super food deprived, like I haven't eaten enough in like the last day or two, or I'm severely dehydrated. So when I get a bad headache, I start to question, am I dehydrated? Because I drink caffeine every day. So it could be, maybe I drank alcohol last night. I drank caffeine this morning. I didn't drink enough hydrating fluids, and I reflect back and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm dehydrated. That's the problem, right? So I try to fix the hydration, and you don't fix hydration by drinking water. Okay, when you're in a state of dehydration, water does absolutely nothing for you. Hydration is not just about water. Hydration is also about your electrolyte balance, the sodium and potassium, and your carbohydrates. So that's why if you're in a state of dehydration and you get taken to the hospital, they do not give you water, okay? They give you a saline fluid that's very similar to coconut water. So if I reflect and I feel like, oh, I'm probably dehydrated, I'm gonna drink a lot of coconut water, some watermelon juice, like stuff like that, right? Or I try to sleep if I realize I'm really sleep deprived, or I try to eat if I realize I haven't been eating enough. But when my headaches start to go too far, like it gets to a certain point, even if I start to correct those things, the headache doesn't go away right away. And I might go to sleep and I still have it. So I use the CBD oil in combination with correcting whatever it is that I know gave me that headache. It's the two things, right? Because when you have pain or aches or things in your body, it's your body trying to tell you something. So my whole approach has always been about bringing my body back into homeostasis. Why am I having this issue? And correcting that, not just taking something that's going to mask it. And cannabis also is not addictive. Like opioids are super addictive. So you could think like people are taking heroin, like people are shooting up heroin. Well, a lot of these people who get addicted to heroin, and like all these, they're addicted to opioids. And it goes from, opioid addiction to heroin addiction. And a lot of these rappers, there was a I forget who it was, but there was somebody recently, I don't know if it was Charleston White, I don't remember who it was, but they were criticizing these rappers because the young ones, because they're not speaking about this fentanyl issue. And I didn't understand completely why he was so upset with the rappers for not speaking about it. But now I'm noticing that a lot of these younger rappers, people in their early 20s, mid 20s, are constantly rapping about Perk 30s and Percocet and, oh, I take my Percocets. The girls talking about how they want a perky dick. Like, you keep hearing that, right? But a lot of the fentanyl poisoning is in pills like that, okay? People buying Percocet to get them high or whatever, and it got fentanyl laced in it. Do you know that fentanyl is the #1 killer of people 18 to 45 years old? Okay, the #1 killer in America of kids and teenagers is guns, okay? The #1 killer of people in America from 18 to 45, fentanyl poisoning, all right? So that's how bad of a problem it is. And so for me, and it's coming from a lot of these cartels, Mexican cartels, it's all coming from China and Mexico. A lot of the Mexican cartels, and it's like really a problem like all over the country. A lot of people aren't aware of it. I started becoming aware of this by stumbling upon stories and people talking about it on YouTube, and I was like shocked and horrified because we don't want a situation like we have in Mexico where the cartel is running the country. Now, I don't think that could happen, but you never know, okay? Now, the thing is that in California, I forget what county it is in California. It's like one of the poorest counties in California, right? And it's like a bunch of poor white and Mexican American farmers, all right? And whatever part of California this is like not only very poor, but also they have like water rations because there's a water problem in California, okay? So there are these cartels. It's Mexican, Hmong people, which I had never heard of until I was on the West Coast. If you're from the East Coast, you might not have ever heard of them, but it's a type of Asian. Hmong people, and I think they said Armenians or something. Cartels that are in the desert, like in California, who have these illegal cannabis grows, because you kept hearing about, oh, illegal cannabis grows, and people are like, okay, whatever. No, they're using very toxic chemicals on these cannabis plant crops that are not only toxic for us to smoke or ingest, but it's also killing the animals, okay? It's killing the wildlife, it's killing the, everything around in the environment, okay? So it's just a problem all the way around. And they're heavily armed. They have these lookout points where if the police start coming, I don't think Hmong people are Mongolian. I don't think so. I think it's different than Mongolian. I think Mongolian people are Mongolian, but maybe I'm wrong. But I don't think that they are, but I don't know. They have these lookout points where they can see when the police are coming, so then they scatter, and they're human trafficking people. They're bringing people here illegally and telling them that you're going to come to America and work on a strawberry plantation and you're going to work off your freedom. And they get here and it's the illegal cannabis grow. And of course, they're not paying these workers because they're telling them they're going to work off their freedom, like an indentured servant or something. And so I don't even know. So anyhow, and they're threatening the police, and the police out there are getting paid $20 an hour, so they're not trying to go up against the cartel. They're stealing water. So you have people out in these areas that own farmland, and they see these cartel people or whatever on their land taking their water, doing all this stuff illegally, and they can't do anything about it. When they call the police are like, they can't do anything about it. The politicians are being threatened. Their families are being threatened. And the way the laws are written in California now, because of the social justice piece about, minorities have been incarcerated for too long because of cannabis, the way the laws are in California now is that if you get caught growing cannabis illegally, it doesn't matter what amount it is, it's only a $500 fine. So if you have these cartels who've taken over the land and heavily armed, and then they get busted for growing illegal weed, okay, pay $500 fine, cost of doing business, let's keep it going. That's what it is. And so to me, when I started to see like how much the other drugs, okay, the cocaines, the heroines, and mind you, okay, I'm not into cocaine, I'm just a weed person, right? But cannabis is a Schedule 1 drug, right? Which means that it has Schedule 1 drugs are drugs that are highly addictive and have no potential medical use at all, right? Which is, both of those are false. Cannabis is not highly addictive, okay? And it also has like 1,000 different medical applications, and that's been the case, and that's well documented all over the world for thousands of years. But yet it's a Schedule 1 drug. But cocaine is a Schedule 2 drug, which means that it has a high potential for abuse, but it has a medical applications. And I never knew that cannabis is used in eye surgery, or was used in eye surgery or something. So it's considered to have some medical applications. So cannabis is rated worse than cocaine, which I don't agree with because it's just not true. But with that being said, the cocaines, the heroin, and all these pills that are being laced with fentanyl, to me, I started thinking to myself, if they're lacing those stuff with it, who's not to say they won't lace weed with it? And when I looked it up, I did see cases of fentanyl laced weed. But I don't know if it killed anybody. I think usually when people die, it's because it's the cocaine, the heroin, or the pills. But still, fentanyl is super poisonous. And so there are cases of fentanyl laced weed in this country. So I said, you know what? And not even to sound, I don't mean to sound racist or prejudiced in any way, okay? But like my weed dude in Chicago, he's Mexican. He's like the best weed dude I've ever had. He always got like 10 new strains every day. He goes to Cali a lot, so I know his stuff is coming from California, which, on the East Coast, all the good weed was always coming from the West Coast. I just saw a documentary because I'm from the Heights. In the Heights, Upper Manhattan, we had the best weed in New York. That's always been the case. Harlem and the Heights. And in my neighborhood, the Dominicans had it, and it was always the best weed. So even if I went to Cali and they had good weed, I'm like, we got good weed too. We just don't have 50 strains to choose from when we walk in the store. And it might be more expensive. Because in Cali, people always had jars of weed. Everybody has jars of weed. They're sharing it with you. It wasn't like that on the East Coast, right? But I just saw this documentary where there's this white dude in Oregon who apparently was supplying a lot of Dominicans in my neighborhood with this weed. So I'm like, oh my God, that's where all that good ass weed was coming from. But I don't always assume. I don't know. I've never sold weed, but I don't always know if people that are selling weed know where the shit is coming from, right? And if somebody did know, right? Like if I ask my weed dude, are you sure this is not coming from cartels? I don't want to sound fucked up and racist for asking that question. But it's like, would they even tell you the truth? So all those things start going through my mind. And it's just scary to me that people are just, dying, because they're thinking they're doing something else. So I started saying, you know what? Let me really start looking at the dispensaries for that reason, because at least it's tested. There's not going to be any of that stuff on it. You know what I'm saying? And so I just started looking at dispensaries again. There's one like a few blocks from me in Chicago. And all this time I'm like, whatever, I'm not going there. But then when I actually started to look at it, I'm like, okay, they have a lot of sales. Like you can get, like maybe you might spend a couple more dollars, but if you shop smart, you can make it so that it's not as expensive, as I thought it was, right? And so, yeah, so for me, that would be the argument. Because like in New York, for example, well, it's new in New York, so New York doesn't have that many dispensaries. There's a lot more dispensaries in Chicago, but also I'm on the north side of Chicago where you have more access. And one of the things about the dealing with the weed man was like, especially like in New York and my dude in Chicago, they would deliver to me. I like people that would deliver. I didn't feel like going over here to get some shit. But there's a dispensary a few blocks away from me, and I'm like really seeing that, and also like just knowing, like, I think there's levels to it, because I definitely think that over the years when I'd be in New York and I get weed from my weed dude and they would tell me whatever strain it is, I'd always think to myself, how does he really know that's whatever strain that he just told me? Like, how does he really know that? Like, a lot of times I didn't really know if I even believed that they knew what they were talking about. And it's like, for me, I just don't want any strains. You know what I'm saying? I do want specific strains. I do want specific terpenes. And just like with my food, I'm like, I go out of my way for good food. Okay? I go out of my way for good food. I drive 40 minutes to get my raw milk, 40 minutes back. Okay? When I'm in New York, I get my raw milk delivered to me from a farm, and I gotta wait all day till they come deliver it. Like I'm going to do work for good food. You will never see me eat Wendy's. You will never see me eat Denny's. I have never eaten at the Waffle House a day in my fucking life, okay? I would not do that shit. I don't care how hungry I am. That's the day I will fast, okay? I don't believe in intermittent fasting on purpose. For me, intermittent fasting is when I am someplace and I don't have access to any good food. The only thing I got to eat, the only option I got is Popeyes, the gas station, 7-Eleven, McDonald's. I'm not going to eat, okay? I do not eat stuff like that. I am not going food shopping at Walmart. Like, I will go out of my way for good quality food. The soaps I put on my skin, the moisturizers I put on my skin. So I'm like, if I'm doing that with everything else, I should also do it on my cannabis. Especially with the fact that a lot of stuff is being laced with stuff, and the fentanyl problem is a real issue, and it's really, really creepy. You know what I'm saying? And I've never been a pill taker, you know what I'm saying? But a lot of people are becoming addicted to opioids, you know what I'm saying? And cannabis actually is very useful in not just preventing opioid addiction, but people who do have opioid addiction, weaning them off of it, okay? And so there are protocols. When you're using cannabis medicinally, you use it differently depending on what you're using it for. So with that being said, somebody asked me a question about smoking versus ingesting cannabis, okay? I do have a video that is talking about the difference between CBD and THC. You can definitely check that video out because I think I get into it in that video as well. But the difference is that when you have the cannabis flower, okay, just the raw flower, what's in that is THCA, okay? THCA, CBDA. That's the acidic form of the cannabinoids. That does not make you high. So if you juice it, people juice cannabis, if you eat it, you make a tea out of it, even though I have a more scientific question about the tea, because people say that if you make a tea, it just is THCA and it doesn't convert into delta-9 THC, which is the activated form of THC. That's the one that makes you high. It's a different, so delta-9 THC, which is decarboxylated, which is why when people make edibles and stuff, they have to heat the weed up first. Or when you smoke and you light it on fire, that heat decarboxylates the THC. It removes that acid group and it goes from THCA to THC, delta-9 THC, okay? And CBD, okay? So CBDA to CBD, okay? So they're different, they have different mechanisms of action, different effects on the body. But like I said, with tea, that's hot water, so I don't know if there would be any conversion of THCA to THC, but I've always been told that cannabis tea is not, it's THCA and not THC, okay? So when you smoke, the THC is going rapidly through it's being metabolized in the lungs and going rapidly to your brain, okay? Quick to your brain. You have immediate effects. You immediately can tell how it feels, how it's affecting you. Stop for a moment, you know what I'm saying? You know when you're good. When you ingest cannabis, it gets metabolized by the liver, okay? and it turns into 11-hydroxy THC. 11-hydroxy THC is a totally different drug than Delta-9 THC, okay? And there's so much to say about that. But 11-hydroxy. Can you guys hear me? Let me know if you can hear me, because somebody called me. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me? When people call, it messes up. Hold on, let me ask. Can you all hear me? You can hear me? Okay, good. Oh, perfect. Okay, somebody called me. I thought it messed up the audio. I'm so glad you can still hear me. Perfect, thank you. Okay. So, 11-hydroxy THC is more potent than Delta-9, okay? And it's also affected by your digestive system because you're absorbing it through your gut and stuff. And when you consume 11-hydroxy THC edibles, when you're consuming the edible, you're ingesting it, you want to ingest it with a fat, okay? That makes it more potent because THC and CBD are fat soluble, which is why people put it in coconut oil and butter and stuff like that. So eating it with a fatty meal, you absorb even more of it, because when you're ingesting something orally, how much of it you absorb and metabolize depends on what you eat it with, right? So that's why when I put my I'm not a fan of all the sugary edibles. I also have a video about that, about how most edibles are no bueno. I have a video about that where I get more in depth about that. So I won't get super in depth about it, but just to give you because I do go into it in those videos. So just to give you a basic answer, that's the difference between smoking and ingesting it. For me, I feel like 11-hydroxy THC is more intoxicating. Oh, also the other thing is too, of course, when you ingest it, there's a longer onset of action. So it takes longer before you actually feel the effects. And you don't know if you took too much until you know if you took too much, until it's too late. And if you did take too much, it takes longer to wear off. And people can feel really sick. Like when you eat too much edibles, it's not a good feeling. But luckily, it won't kill you. Okay, so as miserable as you might feel, if you go to sleep or something, you'll be all right. It's not going to kill you, unlike opioids and fentanyl and stuff like that. So with edibles, you want to be careful with that. We're not ingesting too much of it. To me, for years, I wasn't into edibles. For years, I was not into edibles. Because first of all, I'm not into all the sweets that people put it in. I do like gummies, but I'm not into like brownies and cookies and Rice Krispie treats. And every time somebody had an edible and I looked at the ingredients, the shit had soybean oil and all this crap in it. I just didn't want that. I always said for years, if I eat it, I want it in savory food. Like, can somebody make some chicken with some buttery sauce or some fish with some buttery sauce, or put that shit in my mashed potatoes? Like, I'm more into savory food. I like food, right? So I was never into all the sweets and everything. But I used to just be against edibles, like I like to smoke. Now, to me, smoking and ingesting it are different effects. Because it might have been like, I don't know how many years ago, maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago when I actually ingested it again after like a long time period of not being a fan of edibles. And I remember thinking, well, once I took too much of it, I hated that. Then another time I ingested some and I realized it's a different feeling. To me, when you ingest cannabis, it's a different kind of high. It's a different feeling than when I smoke, right? When I want to calm my nerves, I need to smoke, okay? I don't need to ingest or drink no tea. I need to smoke a blunt. If somebody pisses me off, if I'm really upset, okay, smoking helps me. And if you think about breathing, smoking makes you focus on your breath. And so that's very much connected to spirit. That's connected to calming down your autonomic nervous system and all of that, right? And that's why you see in many traditional cultures, people smoked. So when people act like smoking is just bad for you and people should never smoke anything, that's not true. There are smokable herbs, and there are cultures all over the world who have smoked, who lived a long, healthy life and were fine, okay? And I will get more into depth about that in another video because I have to go in a moment. And that's actually what I'm learning right now in one of my classes, going into depth right now about smoking physiology and the gastrointestinal tract and all that physio. And I love that because My background is in applied exercise physiology and nutrition, and I did applied physiology. So physiology and nutritional biochemistry are huge for me. And can you guys hear me? Can you hear me? Somebody called me again. I'm so annoyed. Please let me know if you can hear me. Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me? Okay. I'm sorry. People keep calling me. Like, I put my phone on Do Not Disturb. It's like, Do Not Disturb doesn't work. People keep calling me, and every time somebody calls me, it messes up the video. I hope somebody doesn't call me again. I'm glad that you guys can hear me. Good. So I think I was saying that ingesting it, I don't know, but I'm just going to pick up for whatever it is. Yeah, if I'm stressed out or upset, I was talking about breathing physiology and the physiology of digestion in my background, and physiology and nutritional biochemistry and how it combines all this stuff. And so I will do more in-depth video about it. But when I'm on my cycle, I have always smoked weed. Like, I never got really bad period pain or anything, but sometimes I just feel really uncomfortable. It's like a bloated feeling because a woman's uterus does get bigger when we're on our cycle, and that some women are in excruciating pain. I was never in excruciating pain, but it's like uncomfortable. Like maybe like the first day or like especially the first day, like I don't really want to sit up. It's like my back just feels weak and weird. And it's like an uncomfortable feeling. And smoke when I'm on my cycle, I'm smoking. All I'm doing is chilling, doing whatever I want, and smoking as much weed as I want. Okay, and it really does help, and it's always helped. And I didn't know years ago that, there's thousands of years of documentation of women using cannabis for their cycles, and also there are a whole lot of other gynecological applications for women, and I'm going to do a video about that very soon, probably tomorrow. A lot of applications for women who are dealing with different gynecological issues or whatever with cannabis. But yeah, but the last cycle I had, I remember I was smoking and it wasn't helping. Okay, like I don't know what it was, but I just felt like so uncomfortable and like crampy and bloated. It was really uncomfortable. So this time I took my cannabis infused coconut oil and I put it in my tea that I drink every day, which is a milk base, a raw milk base, and I drank it, teaspoon of it. That shit calmed it out quick. And I didn't have to use it again for the rest of my cycle. For the rest of my cycle, I didn't have to use that oil again. I kept smoking, but that day, the smoking wasn't doing it for me. So the way that I see it is that the 11-hydroxy-THC, when you ingest it, is more medicinal. That's how it was also taught to me by my Jamaican friend, who's the one that makes the cannabis oil and tinctures that I use. And he's the first one to start teaching me about it. He explained that to me, but now that I understand the science more, it's like a combination of understanding the science and also having experience, where I would say that 11-hydroxy-THC is more medicinal. So when I got into a car accident in 2021, my back was jacked up. I have a video about that too. And if I just moved this way or tried to pick up a skillet or tried to sit down or stand up, I was in so much pain. I could barely get in and out of a car. I mean, my back was in all kinds of jacked up, okay? The thing that helped my back get better was putting the cannabis oil in my tea and drinking that. And people will say that it takes a couple hours to feel it. No. For me, it was 10 minutes, okay? 10 minutes. And maybe that's because I put it in my tea that had a raw milk base. Because again, cannabinoids are fat soluble. And also we have endocannabinoids that our body produces, and it's also produced from animal fats, okay? Which is in the milk and stuff, the butter fat. So that possibly enhanced it all. And I'll have a more in-depth conversation about that on my OnlyFans page. On my OnlyFans page is where I'm doing a lot of case studies and giving an example. It could be something with me or somebody I know, my family member, a client. It could be questions that you have where I'm giving case studies of my approach to certain things, or how I healed a certain thing or whatever. But to me, when I have a headache, I use the oil, okay, in my tea. You can also massage it on or put it on your scalp. I've never done that. I ingest it. Smoking doesn't help me when I have a headache. When I have a headache, I do not want to smoke anything. When my back was hurting, I don't care how many blunts I smoked, that wasn't going to help my back pain. It was the ingesting it part. So as I learn more, I will share more. But I would say 11-hydroxy THC is more potent. Well, it is more potent, but I also feel like it's more medicinal depending on the type of pain you're dealing with. And like with all herbs, you use it differently depending on what you're using it for. Okay, so herbal applications, you can take herbs and you can scrub your body with them. Okay, I've seen that in African cultures. I've seen it in Mesoamerican indigenous cultures, and I'm sure they're not the only two that do it, where they might take herbs and scrub the skin. People make teas with herbs. They might do a steam, a vaginal steam, or nasal steam, or smoke the herbs, make a salve out of the herbs and apply it topically, cook with them. Okay, all of those are different herbal applications. All right. So it's just knowing the herbs that you're working with and stuff like that. So those are different herbal applications. And a lot of people also may not know that the FDA, because I didn't know this until I entered my graduate program, has already approved several drugs that are either imitation THC, imitation CBD, or CBD THC extracts or whatever. And they're not as effective as the natural thing. And so I just find it very interesting where it's like they're legalizing cannabis and, oh, there's medical cannabis. But at the same time, putting all these barriers to kind of make it difficult for people to obtain. The struggles are different in different places. Saying that they're about social equity, but all I see is big chains, cannabis dispensary chains. And then the issue too with the dispensaries, like for me, just like with my food, and I'm in the supermarket, I need to pick stuff up and read the ingredients. I don't care about what it says on the front. I don't care if you tell me it's organic. I don't care if you tell me it's family owned. I need to look at the ingredients. What is in this? Okay? All that stuff on the front means nothing to me. And when it comes to the other things in a dispensary, like the topicals and the edibles and whatever else they got that's not a flower, okay? You can't pick that stuff up and look at the ingredients. And when you go on the website, the websites, and you look at the products, you can't see the ingredients. I find like it's impossible, and that's a problem. And it's hypocritical. Because on the one hand, you want to test the mess out of the flower. Flower can't have any pesticides, can't have any molds, can't have any bacterial, whatever, yada, yada, yada. But then you're selling these other products that have toxic stuff in it. But they'll say, because the FDA says it's grass, which is generally respected as safe or whatever it means, then it's fine, when technically it's really not fine. So, there's a lot to say about that. I'm gonna end this video because people are texting me and calling me, and I gotta go and I gotta finish my school assignments. But there was another topic I wanted to talk about, but I'm just gonna save that for another video tomorrow. I want to talk about these infections that are running around. I don't know if you guys have heard about all these fungal infections and eye drop, contamination is giving people these infections, it's killing them. I'm going to talk about that next. I wanted to talk about that today, but I don't have the time, but tomorrow, okay? So if you learned something from this video, please like this video, please share this video, please follow me on YouTube, because I'm on my Instagram page, I'm reposting it on my YouTube page, The Body Scientist 81. And if you're on YouTube, make sure you follow me on Instagram, okay, at _body_scientist. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. All right, talk to you later. Have a good day. Bye.